Hi, everyone. We're just letting a few more folks join and we'll get started shortly.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us and for being on time. We will begin in about 3 minutes. We're just giving people some time to join the meeting and welcome.
And we just want to put a disclaimer out there that this session will be recorded and it is streamed on Facebook Live.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to South Korean's Women's March Resume Revamp Workshop. My name is Afeza Rozario, and I'm a co-director of the Youth and Professional Development Committee at South Korean's Women's March. These workshops are created to bridge inequities in our community to make professional development resources accessible for all. Joining me tonight as co-facilitators are Nicole and Paveena. But before I pass it over to them to introduce themselves, I want to provide a brief overview of South Korean Women's March and the work that we do. Founded right before the pandemic hit and inspired by global and national women's rights movements, South Korean's Women's March amplifies the voices of South Koreans' diverse women and gender-expansive people. We are an all-volunteer-led, multi-generational, intersectional platform working to foster women's empowerment by dismantling norms, practices, and institutions that support patriarchy and gender injustice. We take our sisterhood to the streets and unify women, girls, and gender non-expansive individuals and connect them to the necessary resources to empower their own lives. That includes fighting food insecurity and period poverty, tackling gender-based violence through healthy relationship workshops and art healing workshops, as well as building political power through our civic engagement work, promoting empowerment through youth and professional development through the workshop as we're holding tonight. Now I'll pass it over to Nicole and Paveena to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Nicole Cobham. Professionally, I'm a manager at KPMG in consulting. And for South Korean Women's March, I serve as the co-program director for youth professional development. And I'll pass it off to Paveena.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Paveena Rewah. I am an HR professional, people manager at a global advertising and communications company. And I also am a member and a co-leader for the South, sorry, for the Mutual Aid Committee. Thank you for joining.
Great. I guess without further ado, I'll share my screen and we can get started.
Also, at any point of the workshop, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can use the raise your hand feature, or you can also unmute yourselves and ask your question.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So just like Afeza and Paveena said, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to talk about how to revamp our resumes, as well as to have some key tips and tricks for interviewing. So let's get started. So what is the goal of today's workshop? Essentially, we want to learn how to market ourselves. This is within our resumes as well as in our interviewing. We want to learn how to confidently convey why we are the best fit for the role that we're applying to, as well as how to develop an impactful resume that really highlights your strengths and your accomplishments. So we'll take the opportunity to discuss personal branding, your resume revamping, and the key sections that are necessary for your resume, as well as some helpful tips for interviewing. And then we'll leave some time to recap and some time at the end if you have any questions or any concerns that you'd like to bring up to us. So one thing I would like to highlight is that it is really important to take ownership of how you showcase your unique skills, your qualities, really to stand apart from other candidates. So make sure you're taking ownership and understanding that you are the CEO of your own brand. So I'll jump to the next slide. So what is a personal brand and why is it important? So essentially your personal brand will be your reputation. So this is how people either perceive you, identify you, different impressions that you make on others. So think about it as, what do I want to be known for? What am I good at? What's my go-to? Like, what am I the go-to person for? Right? So having a strong personal brand as well as a strong reputation will allow you to be able to stand out against your competitors. So if you're going up for different roles and there's other candidates, as well as helping you establish yourself as an expert in your necessary fields or industry, as well as to build trust and credibility with others and attract new opportunities and connections and broaden your network. So being able to clearly understand what your brand is, how to articulate that across to a wide audience. If you're trying to go after, let's say you're known for coding and you want to be that go-to within your company or within the job you're applying for, just really trying to identify what is my niche, what is my brand, how do I want to market myself, and what do I want to be the go-to or known person as for that. So that is something that as you're defining what your personal brand is, this is going to be the distinct and authentic way that you represent yourself. So this is a way to really identify what makes you unique, why someone should go to you for this specific thing. Why are you, based on your accomplishments or achievements, how do you really stand out? So as you're considering, how you want to represent and market yourself, whether within your resume or in an interview or just broadening your horizons, building out your network, taking consideration and just really kind of reflect is, how do I want to represent myself and what do I want to be known for? So going to the next slide is, how can you use your resume to highlight your personal brand? So it is known that recruiters typically take 5 to 7 seconds to actually look through your resume. So you want to make sure that that is the piece that is really amplifying your personal brand and making a great and lasting impression. So this is an opportunity, there's no fixed format what the resume should look like. There are key 6 sections that should be included that, whether you're discussing your experience, your accomplishments, or any awards that you've won, you want to make sure that that is really highlighted in your resume. And regardless of whatever the guidelines is that how you want to represent it, it is really important to include those key information about yourself and the key points of your personal brand or your reputation that you want to highlight, especially in according with the job description. So, like the saying is, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. So that's why it's really important that you are intentional about how you want to, reflect yourself and put out your personal brand within your resume and in your interview. So take the time to really understand, what am I good at? What do I want to be known for? And how do I really highlight that within my resume, as well as when I'm in the interview, really highlighting, why I'm the best fit for the role. So without further ado, I will pass it off to Afeza to discuss how do we get to revamp our resumes.
Thank you, Nicole. So I think one key point to remember when you're developing your resume is your resume is a marketing tool, and that's essentially an employer meeting you on paper, right? Because they don't get the chance to meet you. They see your resume first. So you have to represent yourself on paper first. And all resumes include a few key sections. And they tell the employer about your story, right? They tell the employer about your skills, your competencies, your work history, and how you can essentially make their job easier for them, because employers want to hire individuals that are easy to be around and, you know, just easy to get along with. The key sections of a resume include your header, your objective, your leadership involvement, your community service experience, anything that you can highlight in your resume that will make a very good impression, you should definitely put it on your resume. Professional organizations that you're affiliated with. And another key thing to remember is that employers take about 15 to 30 seconds to glimpse at your resume. And if it's not easy to read and easy to follow, what's going to happen is they're going to move on to the next resume because they have hundreds of resumes to review. So what you want to do as an applicant is to make their job easier to review your resume. Make it easy for them to follow. You don't want to have too much clutter on your resume. You just want to make everything very clear, concise, and organized. And you want to show employers on your resume that you are the best person for the job to fill that position that they're looking to fill. Next slide, please. Okay, so when you're developing your resume, right? Ideally, it's good to have a resume that's one page, but as you progress in your career and you have a lot of experience, of course, you're gonna go over one page, but ideally, it's good to keep your resume at one page. So the first thing that you're gonna start with when you're developing your resume is your identifying information, which is your header. So typically, you wanna make your name stand out as seen on this example. And your header is going to include your name, your email address. So I know we all have those very interesting email address from high school, right? But you want to make your email address a very professional one. Typically your first name dot your last name, maybe include a number in there, and whatever platform you're using at gmail.com, at Outlook. Then you want to include your telephone number. So when you're including your telephone number, it's also a best practice to set up your voicemail. Just in case the employer wasn't able to reach you, you have your voicemail set up. And that also creates a very good first impression. And then if you want to, you can also include your LinkedIn account. Remember, the employer is meeting you on paper, so anything that makes you stand out, you want to include it on your resume. And where should all this contact information go? At the header on top of the page. So this is the first thing that you're going to work on when creating a resume, your identifying information. Okay, so the next step after your name, your contact information is all there. The next thing you want to work on is your objective. Now, when you're developing your objective, the first thing that you want to do is you want to read the job announcement or the job description. And this is the language that you'll see on Indeed or LinkedIn, wherever you find this job that you're interested in applying for. So you want to read the job description and all of the job duties, and then you're going to create an objective that aligns with this job. And you're going to include keywords that's in the job description in your objective. Now, what this is going to do, this is going to signal to the employer that this is the best person for the job. And typically, if you're job hunting and you're sending out a lot of resumes, you don't want to use the generic resume to apply to every job. You want to tailor your resume based on the job description for each of the job that you're applying for. So of course, you're going to have like a general resume with just a dump of information that you're going to use to apply to all of your different resumes. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to use the same resume to apply to all of the jobs, because guess what? Employers, they're gonna know. So your objective is at the top of your resume. It's a great way to showcase your skills and talents that aligns with the requirements of the open position. And how would you know about the requirements? You know about the requirements by reading the job announcement and the job description. And it can also represent your professional goals and showing employers how the job aligns with your long-term career paths. So with your objective, or you can also write an executive summary or just a summary of qualifications. In addition, a well-written resume objective statement should be customized to the job. Okay, I already went over that. So basically, the key takeaway is make sure that the objective and your executive summary aligns exactly with the job description, and you want to quantify as much as possible. So let's say you have 10 years of customer service experience, you want to include this in your objective or your executive summary. Next, please. So your next section is going to be, of course, your education. So this is pretty straightforward. You're going to include the city and state. So for example, let's say you went to NYU or the City University of New York. You're going to have that information there, and you're just going to include where it's located. And you're also going to list the name of your degree along with the specialization. So let's say you have a Bachelor of Science or a Bachelor's of Applied Science, a Bachelor of Arts, and then you're going to list your specialization, whether it's business, cybersecurity, liberal arts, urban studies. You just list finance, you list what area of specialization that you did study. And of course, you want to also put your expected graduation date if you're still a student, or you want to include your graduation date.
One thing I'd like to just note and include for this section here, typically if you are in school or a recent grad, we typically put that at the top of your resume. And then if you're experienced higher and you have more of the experience, your experience section is a little more heavier, you put the education at the bottom, like you see in the example here. I think.
Thank you. Okay, and now for your experience section. So this is the section where you want to highlight your full-time and part-time jobs, your self-employment. If you're a student, you want to highlight your internship and practicum experience. So I know a lot of majors, especially IT and human services, you have to do an internship where you're expected to intern a certain amount of hours to shadow a professional. You want to include this in your resume because you learn transferable skills, right? You're learning how to be a professional in your future career. So although it may not be paid, you're still getting experience, and it's worth mentioning in your resume. And you want to include your job title. So let's say you're an intern, you're going to write intern, the dates of employment, the date of the company, and the location. As seen in the illustration provided, You also want to use bullet points and you want to quantify. So let's say you supervise a staff of 5. You want to quantify that. Let's say you increase you increase revenue by 10%. You want to include that. So this section, you really want to show that you really want to show impact, and you really want to show that you made a difference. You want to show that you saved the company money. Whatever the impact is that you made, you want to quantify it with numbers, percentages in this section. And this is just a great place to showcase all of your skills. And again, you want to read the job description again for the job that you're applying to and see exactly what it is that they're looking for and find ways to incorporate it with the jobs that you've already done. So when the employer is reading your resume, it signals to them this person is the right person for the job. And one easy analogy that I like to think about when I'm doing my resume is I like to think of myself as a product and the employer is a buyer. So the employer is obviously searching for the perfect product. So I'm going to highlight that in my experience.
Sorry, and one more thing to note too, just like you see in the image here, is really emphasizing that when you're writing out your experience in the bullet pointed form, that we use verbs, and you are make sure if it's any previous roles, you're using like managed, recognized, any current roles, like currently serving or serve or manage. So just being aware of the action verbs in past tense and present tense when you're filling out your experience section.
Of course. And additionally, I want to also mention that your resume should be in reverse chronological order. And what that means is your resume to tell a story, right? So you're starting with your most recent job and then you work your way down to your first job. So the first job on your resume should be your current job or the last position that you held, moving all the way down to your very first job. So it should show growth and it should also tell a story.
Can I also add to that section? If you do find that your roles, let's say you have more years of experience, if you do find that your roles are sort of taking up more space on your resume and it's going to go over to the second page, I would say to stay within the 8-year mark. So within the last 8 years of work experience. Because really, at that point, let's say you've progressed in your career, you would be able to showcase that same level of development and growth. And so you want to sort of just highlight that those particular roles within the 8 to 10-year mark.
Thank you. And now, so I just want to add as well one last thing. Again, your resume is marketing yourself on paper. And so let's say your resume is free of any grammatical errors. What that signals to the employer when they're meeting you on paper is that you pay attention to detail, right? Because they don't have any way to assess that information because they haven't met you yet. And if your resume has a professional appearance as seen in the illustration on the screen, that also tells the employer that you're very careful, you pay attention to details, and you're competent. So you want to make sure if you're using a particular font for a particular section, you want to be consistent. So attention to detail is very important when creating your resume because those are the little things that employers are looking at. That's all for me. Next.
Okay, I'll take it up from here. So our next section is leadership and involvement. So this is an area where you can highlight any extracurriculars that you're a part of. So this can be inclusive of volunteering work, any clubs, organizations, societies that you're involved in. Especially if you have any leadership roles, I think that's a perfect place to showcase that. So even if you're part of an organization and you're saying you're a member or volunteer, that gives you an opportunity, especially if you are at entry level, to discuss, maybe team building, communication skills, relationship management. You're still going to gain experience that you can rely, kind of relate into a job and any other external, activities. So this is an opportunity if you don't necessarily have as much to fill up in the experience space, that you can highlight any volunteering, external curriculars, whether sports, community work, if there's any associations that you're part of related to your background. Take the opportunity to just really showcase that, as well as any job specific roles that you've had. And I will jump to the next slide here. Our next section is skills and interests. So this is going to be a place as well to showcase any of specific skills, especially in alignment what the job description has here. And there's a way to differentiate what to really highlight. So we have the difference between hard skills and soft skills. So if you don't know the difference, we have hard skills, which are more specific to the job function or industry that you're looking into. So this will be related to things that you learned either in school, so maybe degree focused, any certifications that you've done, so programs and exams that you've taken that are really honing into that specialty that you're looking to enter in that job field, any trainings or materials, and any experience that you've gained on the job. So this can be inclusive of, let's say, even personally, like you're multilingual. That's meant to be a benefit. I would 100% include that into your skills because that will set you apart from other candidates. If you're, for example, have like Microsoft Office. So I know most of us are experienced in that, but let's say if your job is really technical and let's say like Excel, if you know how to do coding, modeling, various things, I would even not only just include that you're proficient in Excel, but maybe provide some examples of things that you've done. If you build financial models, VBA, I would highlight that there. If you're any programming languages, I know especially now in the job fields, a lot of data analytics type of roles. If you have those skills, 100% take this opportunity and highlight that there, especially if that's something that in the job description they're saying is a preferred, requirement or something that they're looking for in a candidate. This is opportunity to really list out everything that you are proficient in. And, there might be opportunities to bring up in interviews, maybe some projects that you've done in the past. So I would 100% include that. Anything that is a hard skill that you feel is very technical to the job that you are applying to, that you would like to showcase. And then you have soft skills, which is more people skills, social skills. So, this is relationship management, customer service, public speaking, problem solving, organization, time management. Especially if that is highlighted in the job description, there might be opportunities within the role where you have to do a lot of presentations, you have to work with clients. 100% you should include that there, as well as working that into the language in your experience section. So if you work with clients, you've managed how many client relationships, it really, developed your relationship building. So really highlighting those, especially if that's what the job is looking for, but they like to see not only that you can deliver on the technical work, but that you are a person that knows how to communicate with senior leadership, your peers, your team built, you're a team player and you know how to work with clients. So that's an opportunity as well, just to really highlight, hey, not only you have the technical skills, but you also have the personal skills as well. And then lastly, we have honors, awards, and any professional organization. So this is an addition that you can include in your resume, not necessarily required, but it can only help you. So just kind of similar like we had with the leadership involvement, but if there are any awards that you've won, whether it's academic, job related, professional association, you want to highlight that. This is an opportunity, right? Like you're bragging about yourself, really showing why should you pick me over the other candidates, because you've got certain, scholarships. You've gotten awards for that was related to excellence that you've done in your job, and whether it was volunteering work, maybe you've got an award for something in the community, as well as with school or with job. This is an opportunity for you to say, hey, I was the winner of this. I was nominated for this. And that will give you, a nice way to, in your interview, kind of discuss that and kind of an opportunity to brag on yourself as well. I know as well for any entry level or students, it's important to include your GPA because that is something that some employers do request. But as a seasoned professional, typically we don't include your GPA. It could be provided if requested, but typically you'll just include your education at the bottom of the section. And you could just say that you were awarded whatever degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree, etc. but it's not required to necessarily include your GPA there. And then the last 2 points is leadership positions and professional associations. So if you do have any roles that, within a professional organization, nonprofit, any external stuff as well, feel free to, include that there, especially if, let's say, you're in the medical fields, engineering fields, business, if there's any, roles you sit on any boards. I think this would be the perfect opportunity to show that not only that you are excelling in your career and your experience, but you're actually giving back and you have leadership roles within the community, within whether it's New York City, within your previous school, you sit on the board of something. This will be an opportunity to show that you're a leader, not with only in your previous firms, but you're a leader in the community as well. So if nothing else, I'm pass it off to Paveena to discuss some best practices and jump into interviewing tips.
Thank you, Nicole. So before I move on just to best practices for resume building and revamping, I did want to just highlight that the organizations or activities that you are involved in really just showcase your personality sometimes and your passions. And it's really nice as an employer to see that, right? Because as you're highlighting all of your professional experiences and your skill set, it's also nice for an employer to see that you're well-rounded and that you may be interested in, various activities within the organization once you join them. So definitely it's like a little bit of a showcase into your personality, into what your passions are. And it's a really nice thing for employers to see because we are living in a world that's become more and more aware of especially in the workplace, aware about what are we doing in society. So on to some best practices for our resumes. Our ladies mentioned many of these already. So a couple of them, I'm just going to go through it. Keeping your resume really easy to read and well organized. Keeping your sentences short, concise, very direct. Using those action words like creating, demonstrating, leading, managing. Showcasing and highlighting your contribution to any work project, really taking a leadership role and contributing to a team. Those are all things that can be conveyed when you use action verbs. Another thing is just using those things to quantify. So if you've led a team of 5 people, or if you're on a global scale working on a project, or if you've had to manage a particular group of folks, definitely talk about that, right? If you're saving the organization money on a quarterly basis, also very important to note. Using bold to make things stand out. Yes, I would say you can do this. Try not to do it in too many places because remember that we have our headers on each of our sections. So don't go ahead and bold everything, but definitely highlight it. I would say highlight it for yourself if you also need it and make some notes on your resume so that you can also talk about these things, right? Proofread your spelling, your grammar, your consistent punctuation. Sometimes employers are just breezing through 20 seconds, but that one little punctuation or one little spelling error, they will notice, right? Because they're looking at so many resumes on hand. A quick tip. We do have lots of resources out there, lots of Google searches, lots of coaching and resume building templates, wizards that can help with the resume. Another thing that is fairly new, it's called ChatGPT. It helps us to refine language when we are asking questions or if we want to know how to sort of word a particular sentence. So this could be a really great and useful tool for you. So this way you can refine your resume. Okay. So usually we're saying we do want you to keep your resume to 1 page. And I am very, very supportive of this. I think many times folks in HR or in recruitment, they just browse through the resume, pointing out and choosing those keywords from the job description. They already know what they're looking for, right? So it's a very quick glance at a resume, and then they usually put that on a short list of applicants that are qualified and ready to review more closely. Keep your resume, if you are handing it in by mail or giving it to somebody, keep it on paper that's subtle colors, not too many patterns. I would say the one exception to this rule is if you are in a creative space. If you're applying to a role that's somewhat more creative, then you can definitely do a little bit more and experiment a little bit more with that, but definitely keep it to more of a subtle color and pattern. If you are mailing your resume, you want to put it in a large envelope versus folding it into a letter size. And then tailoring your resume to really fit the role you're applying for. So if your role requires lots of customer service, lots of communication, you would want to highlight, communicated with teams across the country on various troubleshooting issues, right? Or you would just want to highlight those kind of keywords that go back directly to the job description. Okay, next slide. So now that you have the perfect resume, because we've revamped it, we are going on to some interview tips. And interviewing can be a little bit overwhelming, scary, and the like, right? But I do think one of my big tips for going in an interview is really to study your resume. And this sounds silly, right? But it's really kind of like you have to know everything about yourself, how you want to market yourself. And so for me, one thing that I do is I study my work experience. And what I do is I go down each of my roles and I give examples of what I would like to highlight based on that role, right? So some interviewing tips here are researching the company prior to the interview, ensuring that their values and mission align with your belief system, that you're passionate about the work that they do. If there's one thing that they do that you really love about them, you would want to highlight that in the interview, right? Try to find some time to put that in so that you can highlight that, oh, I've done my research, and they do acknowledge that. It's always a nice thing when you can actually talk about a certain campaign that they've done that you really thought was interesting. Using your resume as a guide to guide your answers on conversations. So pulling examples from the previous experience that you've had can also prove to just guide the conversation and provide that level of information to the interviewer. Prepping a few examples during your interview is really important. So going down your work experience and highlighting just a couple. Using the STAR method. So the STAR method is allowing yourself to create those examples based on those four areas. So having a clear situation, talking about what the task is, what was your action, and then what was the final result. Okay, so this is really a nice, short, concise way of sort of highlighting from end to end how you've progressed in any particular project. The next bullet is prepping a question. I used to be very intimidated and scared, to be honest, to ask a question because I was like, well, they're interviewing me. My question is probably going to be not important, irrelevant. I never used to ask questions. And then as I progressed in my career or just learning about the organization, sometimes these questions will come up. So if you're kind of stumped at a question, I would say I put a couple of examples of questions that you could possibly ask. So you can ask the interviewer, what's the most challenging part of your job, right? I mean, that's a little bit of a bold question, I must admit. You can also ask about the team structure. You can ask about, what do you like most about this organization? Those are some 3 varying questions that you can ask, whichever one you're comfortable with. If there are any other questions that do come up within the interview, you can feel free to ask. If you are in the first round of interviews, it's customary not to ask about salary, but rather to give information on what your salary expectations are. So in a lot of cases, employers already have this because you've already completed the job application, which would say what are your salary requirements. So they pretty much know, right? But if you are very curious about salary information, you can also do some research on various websites in terms of what a range could be. That's sort of a question for the second and third round interviews. And then I just did want to just give a tip on there are certain things that you do not have to answer, anything relating to your medical history, personal family information, or anything that is personal in nature. You do not have to answer as an applicant, as a candidate. So just feel comfortable to say, I would prefer to talk about my professional experience right now, and that's okay. Right? So we just kind of guide the conversation in a professional manner. Okay. So the next one.
I actually wanted to include one thing just on questions I typically said in the past is maybe kind of wrapping up on the interview, and you can tell me your thoughts, Paveena, but after everything's wrapped up, asking the interviewer, is there anything on my resume that I could further explain and maybe help you understand a little bit more? Or do you have any reservations about, anything that maybe I can articulate better, or any questions that, you may feel that I can't perform based on the job description? I'm happy to provide more clarification, but just making sure that they fully understand and they feel that like, your role and what you're saying is fit to what they're looking for. I always like to ask for clarification before letting them go, just in case I can always, advocate for myself a little bit more.
Yeah, that's a great point, Nicole. It also shows that you are willing to receive feedback, right? So that's also part of this conversation, that if you are provided feedback, you're willing to accept it at that point. So it sets a really nice tone for the rest of that interview. We are going to go, we're going to go to the behavioral interview questions. So I pulled out some interview questions that, so behavioral interview questions are really questions that highlight actions, right? They highlight things that you've done in a particular task or project, and they really do speak to your experience. It's a really nice way to highlight, to give some examples of ways that you have progressed, you have grown, you have moved from one place to the next in your role, and you've really taken the time to excel, to be motivated, to show those leadership qualities, to be a team player, to really take it one step further than just having a particular skill set that can match any given role, right? So sometimes interviewers will just ask you to describe, for example, an occasion when you've had to manage your time to complete a task, and how did you do that? And in this question, you can talk about prioritizing your day. You can talk about working on a really busy team and how you've managed your time. You can talk about organizing. So definitely think about how you work. What are those things that maybe and it does help if you write these things down prior to, so that this way it can be sort of like what I used to do is I would put these questions on cue cards, on index cards, and I would sort of practice them. So practice these examples as if you're telling a story, because that is sort of what it is, right? You're telling your story. You're highlighting all of these amazing things about yourself that make you the best fit for that position. So that's one example, describing an occasion where you failed at a task. No one of us is perfect. We are all human and we do make mistakes. So the goal here is really to convey that if you've made a mistake or if you failed at a task, that you've learned and grown from it, and that the next time you have you're able to course correct, right? So it shows accountability. It shows that you are aware of a mistake that you've made and that you are learning from that mistake or that particular example, right? Describe a time when you've used leadership skills to motivate your team or colleagues. Really important to highlight leadership qualities, right? I would say the most important thing under leadership qualities or skill set is taking the initiative um, at at this stage, right? So sometimes it's not always about taking charge in a meeting or being loud, none of that, right? It maybe just means taking the initiative to ask a question or asking someone, hey, do you need some help? I have some free time. So being able to sort of insert yourself in situations that don't always seem so apparent, right? So that's that question. The next one I have is describing your process for solving problems. The skill of being able to solve problems is very important. Highlighting examples from your previous experience or your community work or your volunteer activities is really important. It just shows that you sort of are easygoing, you can manage multiple things. You're thinking about, well, how do I make this situation better, right? How do I resolve the situation? So I would say definitely we highlight those examples. Describe a time when you had to learn something new. In what ways did you approach the learning process? In every role, there's an opportunity to learn. So whether that's learning about that particular industry or learning about that organization or learning a new skill set or learning about a new team or task, there's lots of opportunity to learn and grow within a new role. So highlighting times where maybe you didn't know something that you were able to learn new is really great to talk about, right? So that could be something like a technical skill, like an Excel skill that you didn't have before, and maybe you were working on a project and you were able to get that. It could be presentation skills, not having an opportunity to present something, but then all of a sudden this project came up at work and you were in that position where you were presenting something to a team, right? So that you've learned, right? It could also just be shadowing somebody and learning how maybe somebody else works and having the opportunity to see how something else is done. Maybe that's not even within your role, right? And then the last one is, have you ever had to complete a task under time pressure? So this is sort of like that first one, managing time and organization. So I would say organization, managing your time, being able to organize your day and prioritize is important to just showcase that you can get the job done. You are a good fit for the role. This is sort of across the board on all of these, on various different positions. So all of these behavioral questions can be taken and put into context within your experience, right? So I do encourage you to write some of these down, prep yourself for your interview, put it down on index cards, review them, and really just embody who you are and present yourself in the best way. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we are recapping the session. Just giving a quick time check. It is 6:51, so I think we're good on time, right, ladies? Okay. So just to recap, for your resume, we just want to always be authentic and honest. Everything that is on your resume and your application will be verified at the point that you're at your final interview session. So please do ensure that you are doing that. showcasing your personal brand in your resume, highlighting your unique skills, experiences, and accomplishments, as well as your passions through your the organizations that you've worked with. Remembering to be confident and positive about your abilities and experiences, showing that you are the best fit for the role, using those keywords from the job description, from the posting to enhance and align to the organization. For entry-level candidates, we would like to just say that you can highlight your experience and examples from your skills and volunteer experiences. Let's say you don't have that much work experience. For professionals, you would highlight those examples from previous work experience for your resume. Is there anything else that Afeza or Nicole you want to add?
I would just say, as you're, like we said, showcasing your personal brand, really taking the time to step back and looking through your experiences, the things that you are passionate about, your unique skills, and not only just what you've done historically, but what do you want to do in the future? Who is that? The brand that you want to be, the person that you want to be the go-to for and known for. So just being intentional about that, really, I think that's more just like a soul searching type of thing, whether it's professionally or personally. What do I want to do? What do I want to be known for? And just start taking goals and steps, finding the right jobs, to find the right networks, volunteering opportunities, extracurriculars that will get you to where you want to be. So that's my little piece there.
And I would like to add that when you're prepping for an interview, it's very important that you also work on your mindset. And your mindset is basically the belief that you have something special to offer the world, and we all have something special, right? And really work on the thoughts that we're having before an interview, because our thoughts create our feelings, and then our feelings create action or an inaction. So if you're not having pleasant thoughts before your interview, what's going to happen is you're going to create an inaction. So you want to tell yourself all the positive things about yourself before an interview. And when the employer asks you if you have any questions, I would say always have questions for them, right? And you want to think of this as a conversation, right? Because let's say you do get the job, this is going to be your lifestyle. This is going to be what you have to do for about 2 to 3 years. So you also want to take this opportunity to ask them questions to see if this is also a right fit for you, because it has to be a value exchange on both sides. So this is not just about them, this is also about you and what's ultimately is going to make you happy. And one simple question that I like to ask, and I really like to observe when I ask this question, I like to ask, tell me something that you love about your job. And if that pause is too long after I ask that question, I already have my answer, right? So if you want to keep things very simple, tell me something you love about your job. And you just sit back, because remember, they had their chance to interview you. Now it's your turn to interview them. And another question I like to ask is, tell me about a project that you're currently working on. So that gives you insight as to what you're getting into if you're selected for the role that you're applying to.
Agreed. Just one thing I also say, especially due to our environment here, being aware if you want to go back into the office full time, remote, hybrid, being very transparent and asking those questions, work-life balance, all of that. So make sure to
Yes,
be
definitely.
transparent about that and have those discussions with you. Yeah.
I definitely agree with both
So
of
if
you.
not, I will pass any questions. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I actually think there was a lag on my end. I just was saying that I agree with both of you.
Okay, great, no worries. So just opening us up this time now for any questions that anyone may have we're happy to discuss with you all. And feel free to either use the chat or to unmute yourselves.
If there's no questions, that means we did a really good job.
So everyone's ready to revamp their resume and go on their interviews.
Maybe if I have any interview don'ts,
Question.
because I know we've done
So
do's.
we
Oh,
have one question in the chat so far. So how can one compensate for a lack of education? Good question.
Mhm.
Does one of the ladies want to take that, or?
I mean, we can, if everybody wants to say one thing, you can start and we can go.
Sure.
So the
Okay.
way that I would approach this question is I would communicate value, right? And I'll show up in other ways, like to the interview, I'll be very polished, well put together, maybe arrive 15 minutes before, be nice to the front desk staff. And, you know, I would say that sometimes it's all about conveying those transferable skills that although I may not have the education and I am currently working on it, I can present myself that I can perform in this role. So that's how I would approach this, by just being over prepared.
Mhm. And agreed with Afeza, just leveraging the experience that you have, because hopefully you're applying to a role that you are experienced in, and you can speak to that, whether it's previous work experience, the extracurriculars, but just really highlighting that although maybe you don't have the educational background, but see, I'm a fit. You see everything on the job description, I have experience in, and you're just kind of tying back to saying, well, I'm still the best fit for the role because I've actually been on the ground and doing these key activities that are part of this role. So just really selling yourself and your brand as to maybe you don't have that piece, but you've already been in the field for X amount of years. You've had experiences with these X amount of situations. So just really highlighting and showcasing your skills and your experience in the role that you're applying for.
And also by using the STAR method, this is a perfect example where you wanna present a situation and a task and an action and a result of how you are able to produce some results.
Yes, I completely agree. I did want to add that there is a section on the job description that usually says qualifications. So that usually kind of tailors what the organization is looking for this particular role. So if you are working towards a certain level of education, you would want to convey that, okay, I'm going to get my degree, or I'm pursuing a certification in this area. So this is sort of that place that you can highlight what you are working towards. And then in addition to your experience and what you've experienced thus far. Also, sorry, just wanted to add something. If you have been chosen for an interview or for a pre-screen, it does mean that you've met minimum qualifications for the role, right? So that means they want to talk to you to understand if you are a good candidate to move on to the next level. So the fact that they're reaching out and employers reaching out to you means that you have met the minimum qualifications. So really, it's about you, as the ladies have mentioned, showing up as the most confident, authentic self, right? To be able to convey all of your experiences.
Any other questions?
Does anyone want to come off of mute and ask a question or pop it in the chat? I think we've only just answered one so far. So you can go ahead and get off mute if you want, or put it in the chat.
I would, in the meantime, we're waiting for another question. I want to highlight your nonverbal communication when you're actually at the interview. So your tone, your posture, going into the bathroom and practicing your power pose. So all these little things, it does add up to big results in the end. One last thing I would say, well, probably not the last thing, but always follow up with a thank you letter after your interview and tailor it to be very specific based on the conversation that you had, because that can really set you apart to land the job.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, we had a couple of comments. So recently you've met qualifications, but it's you haven't heard back. And then someone did follow up and they didn't hear back for over a month from the potential employer. This does happen, within recruitment cycles. There are certain times of the year that are the best time to sort of apply and look for roles. Generally between January and I would say the fall are the best time. There is a bit of a lull in the summertime because people are on vacation and the holidays. So the best time is it really ramps up between January and March. And then April to June is sort of like another cycle. And then June to August, depending on the industry, because this can also change. Some industries are more busy during certain times of the year. So if you're in finance or you're in accounting, maybe not the end of the year because everyone's trying to close out. So usually they're trying to hire and get into a new role at the beginning of the year. So just those are some tips in terms of best times of the year when you can look for a role. Please don't get discouraged if you don't get a response back. Sometimes I say it's sort of a blessing in disguise, right? Because I believe that you'll find the right fit for you for where you are at. And you have, as Afeza said, I really love this. You do have something special to contribute, and you will find that role that will allow you to grow, but also give you that experience that you need as well. So we have another question. If someone is interested in a job which is different from what the candidate's educational qualifications or degree is suitable, how can that person tailor their resume accordingly? So is your question more along the lines of if you have a different educational background than what the role is, than what you're applying for? Shriyasha? I do think that that's what I understand it to be. So if the educational background is different than what the role is, how do we, tailor our resume to that?
Yeah, I can
Nicole,
give an example. Yeah, I can give an example. So, I'm in financial services, but we have a lot of, especially in the recent years, we've been moving more into the tech space. So we have a lot of folks with the data science background, but may not have the financial background. So what I've met with some of the people we've hired thus far or who we're hiring now is although they may not have the perfect example, because I'm in consulting and someone who's coming in from the STEM side wants to come into our industry. So what it is really, especially as a consultant, we are offering services to our clients. So if you have that STEM heavy background and maybe not specific to whatever specific industry you're trying to go for consulting, so let's say financial services, I really have seen in the past as well with my colleagues is really highlighting the technical experience that you have. So let's say if you're really good with coding and you could build models, maybe you've not built financial models, but you've done it in the past where you just emphasize you're eager to learn. You have a degree, PhD in this STEM program and subject. And you've maybe done it, maybe skewed towards that specific field, but you're really interested in entering the financial background. You're willing to learn. It just really relay that you're a great person to work with in the first place. You already have like the technical knowledge and you're eager to learn about a new industry and bring the value that you have from your experiences previously into this new role. I can speak for consulting. We love people who come from STEM backgrounds programs because we can teach you the industry, but we can't always teach the technical skills. To talk with you further on that. I can pass it off to anyone else who has a.
Yeah, I agree. I think that in this instance, having a very eager and positive attitude about learning and really being involved in this way, I agree with Nicole as well, highlighting your previous technical skills, what you would bring, what you would offer in a very transferable way, right? So just letting them know or showcasing how you would manage this given that. So instead of maybe, so when you're going through and talking about highlighting your examples, before they even ask, you know, this may be a challenge for you. How would you answer that? Or how would you work through that? You should already have that, right? Question about how you would sort of work through that particular thing. And you would say, I think that I have a great opportunity here to learn about more about this area. I'm really interested. This is where your research also can come into play. I'm really interested in this type of work for this and this reason. I've seen your organization do this. So really talking about that level of research, your experience, and kind of packaging it in a way that you're able to convey to them in that you want to grow and learn in this particular area.
And to add, I would also say it doesn't hurt to leverage the power of networking. So sometimes it's all about just meeting the right person, right? And doing your research to see a problem that this company that you're interested in working for is currently facing and offering solutions when you meet that person through networking and how you can help this company solve this problem and save them money or outperform in whatever services that they're providing. So just communicating your value and networking. So attending networking events and being connected to the right people.
So Rahana had a question about, is there anything specific that jobs look for when applying? I think that's your question. So I do think that there's lots of answers to this one. It really kind of, it may depend on the role, but what a lot of jobs look for are people who can communicate well, people who can work on a team, someone who is eager and willing to learn a new skill or learn within the organization once they get in. Um, Lots of organizations just look for very confident, positive individuals who are able to grow with them, right? I think our time is almost up. So I think, are we ready to conclude? Do we want to ask for any more questions at this point?
I think we have time if we have another question. Anyone else
Okay.
in line? Yeah.
Oh, Nicole, you did put in, I just wanted to mention that we are happy to chat offline if anyone is interested in consulting.
Also, I just want to respond really quickly to Doris's comments where she said, if you haven't heard back from a prospective employer after months, I would say sometimes I like to think of this as redirection. And I like to think of this also as every no that I get is closer to my yes. And every interview that I do go to, it makes me more confident. So sometimes it goes back to the mindset. It's just redirection. And just know that you're closer to your yes and not to give up. Just
Yeah,
continue, continue going on your interviews.
agreed. Agreed.
Yeah.
One tip, if you do see a role that's been posted for about more than 4 weeks, so about a month, they may be at the end of their recruitment process. So it may not necessarily be that they've flagged you as a no. It just may be that they're, finished with their applicants, they've finished reviewing applicants, or they're at the end of that recruitment cycle. So sometimes everyone that hasn't been selected, you will probably receive one of those very generic, they sometimes the organizations, they want to be able to respond to you, but sometimes once they fulfill the requirement to fill that role, they send out a very generic statement, right? Don't be discouraged by that. That's sort of just the organization wanting to let you know. So I would say just keep on going, still apply to your roles. A really great time. The window of application is generally between the 1 to 3 week window, I would say, but it really depends on the recruitment process. A great question to ask on your interview is, where are you in the recruitment process? So they'll let you know if they're at the front of it or they're ready to make a decision.
Also, very unrelated to this workshop, but if you want to find out about our events and programming, you can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at South Queens Women's March.
Thank you.
Mm.
Any last questions before we wrap up? All right. Well, thank you so much for everyone joining us this evening. Honestly, it was a great conversation. Learned so much from you, Afeza, Paveena. Like, oh my gosh, it's something I
Same
always look
here.
forward to every year. I hope you all learned something new. And as Paveena said, please feel free to reach out to us following this session. We're happy to answer any questions, concerns. Like she said, like not only just about your resume and what you put out there, but also your network and who you know. So we're here to chat, bounce off other ideas with as you're going through this, job application process. But really grateful for all of you to join. And I'll give, if anyone has any closing remarks, Visa or Paveena, before we wrap up.
I just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone for joining. Without you being here, we wouldn't have, folks to speak to. So thank you so much for being here, for spending your time with us, and just really appreciate the opportunity for this. I have also learned a lot from you ladies.
And just keep going. Each rejection just closer to your yes. And that's going to be a better fit for you when you finally get that yes.
Absolutely.